I guess we gotta talk about that video, huh?
I'm definitely very into Asian men.
I am Asian, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Can we hug?
Sure.
How are you?
Good. Goodbye.
I feel so bad.
Okay. Hello. Welcome back to the Elliot Show. I'm Bob. Today we're gonna talk about dating preferences because there's a video that came out recently. It's part of a series that the publication The Cut does called The Button, and the title of this one is Blindfolded People Go Speed Dating. It's got over 1 million views, and people on Twitter are just going to town about it, going to town about all types of angles of conversation that they think are appropriate. So that's great. Let me first try to explain what goes on in this video and see if you can kind of pick up on what I'm trying to talk about. So the part of the video that's being disseminated a lot features what appears to be a white woman who is dressed, it seems, as an anime character, who is explaining that she really likes anime and K-pop, and that, I guess, in that vein, likes Asian men. Like, that's her thing.
What is something that you watch by yourself that's a guilty pleasure that you don't tell anybody?
I mean, I watch a lot of anime. I watch
Me too.
a lot of Asian shows like Korean dramas.
What is your type?
I'm definitely very into Asian men. It's not like a deal breaker or anything.
She explains on this speed dating show in which blindfolded people talk, and if they don't want to go on a date with the person, they hit the button. My mother's being very loud, so you're just gonna have to deal with that. This is my life, okay? This is what my life is like. They can't hear her. Now, another part gets disseminated a lot featuring the Asian dude who is on the speed date with her blindfolded, apparently going up to hug her, and after hugging her and they go sit back down, he hits the button.
We get along on a lot of different topics, but I felt that it was something where I could become a really good friend with you.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a gut feeling for me.
No, that's totally valid. Yeah.
Now, 2 points. For one, people are saying that the white woman is a Asian fetishizer because she is dressed as an anime character, saying that she likes Asian guys, basically because of the Asian content that she consumes. Now, when we say Asian, of course, we mean East Asian, typically in the United States, which is a bit problematic, but also makes sense because we use shorthand to refer to groups. It wouldn't be as comfortable for people to say East Asian all the time, even if that would be better. So as a partially Asian person, I will begrudgingly accept the premise and say, sure, Asian, East Asian. So they're saying she's an Asian fetishizer and kind of cringing on behalf of the Asian man that she's on the speed date with. And then people are also LMAOing at the way in which he hits the buzzer, thus signaling he doesn't want to date her, particularly because before he does it, he gives her a hug. And people are saying that him giving her a hug, as well as the girl who came afterwards.
Do you want to give me a hug and see how tall I am?
Not right now.
Was a thing that he did to gauge whether or not he wanted to date the girls, because when he hugged them, he could feel their size. He could feel that they were fat. I'm going to use the word fat here because my friends who consider themselves fat say that they prefer that somebody say fat rather than overweight or heavy set or other sort of almost euphemistic terms like that. People prefer to say fat and prefer to talk about almost like fat pride in a sense when they talk about changing beauty standards with regards to weight. So that's why I'm going to use that term, and I hope that that doesn't bother anybody. So on one hand, you have accusations that the woman is an Asian fetishizer, and on the other hand, you have accusations that the man is fat phobic. And then a lot of people who are basically accepting both premises and saying it's all a mess and they both suck. So that's where we're at. And of course, the yelling is very loud and the points are very emphatic. That's not a word. Emphatic. Emphatic. That's a good word. So here's where I'm at with it. For one, I want to say that we don't know these people. We don't know them personally. And so even if we all accepted the idea, which we don't, that they are indeed a Asian fetishizer and fat phobe, respectively. Even if that were the case, it would only be our interpretation of what we saw in the video. We don't know if there's evil editing going on. We don't know if people were being told to act certain ways. We don't know if that is completely separate from the context of what these people actually experienced and what was actually happening in their minds. So that's a thing. The second thing I want to say is these videos, I get that they're interesting viewing, but I always feel like these folks don't get paid enough, because even though you are getting paid some amount of money to appear in one of these dating show kinds of things, all of a sudden clips can disseminate from your thing and now everybody thinks that you're the worst person in the world, and you got paid what, like a couple $100 for it? I don't know. And also in general, like, you get a lot of cringy opinions and a lot of lowest common denominator opinions, and videos like these sort of welcome those. They welcome people just having hot takes and speculating all that they can about these real people from these things, these situations that are very awkward and have a lot of nuance in them. With all that being said, I didn't bring like a ton of research. I didn't bring some deep theories. I didn't bring some crazy stuff to talk about. This video is kind of just gonna be a rant, and the rant is somewhat like commentary, like social commentary, you know, pushes up glasses that I'm not wearing. It's sort of also like advice. So quickly, I'll say that I'm a person who has dated a few girls, has been in, you know, situations with a few girls romantically and stuff. You know, I'm in my mid-20s. I am a cis-het dude, and I've been bad in relationships. I've had bad dating standards, dating ideas. I've been a bad person sometimes, and there's also other times that I've been good and had good ideas and learned a lot from the things that I did wrong, which is something that I'm always striving to do. I'm always striving to think about myself and relationships that I have gone through and see how I can be a better person and stuff like that. So when I give advice, I don't do so as like big dating coach genius guy. I'm giving advice from the perspective of a person who has thought about these conversations a lot, has thought about this kind of situation a lot. And perhaps with my experience and the things that I've perceivably figured out, I will be able to say something that is interesting or insightful to you. If not, then that's fine. And I don't want to waste your time anymore. So I'm just going to get into my points, and you guys let me know what you think. And if you like the points I make, hit the bell, because bells are good. Now, at the very least in the United States, our society has absolutely garbage ideas of love and romance and intimacy. And if we don't acknowledge that, no matter where we are, who we are, I don't know. I feel like that's dangerous, because the amount of things that we think are cool or that we think are completely acceptable, I just think that there's so many things that are wrong, that we get wrong, and that we teach young people from an early age, thus leading them to a lot of wrong things and bad experiences throughout their lives. In order to illustrate my sort of problems and my ideas about dating preferences, I have basically 3 main points. My main point is that we need to rethink how we view dating preferences. Now, the title of this video is The Problem with Dating Preferences, but I don't think anybody is going to have 0 dating preferences. Of course, that's such an ambiguous term in the first place. Like, could be a million different things you call a dating preference. In this case, I am speaking about the categories and ideas that we have in our brains, ideally, basically, of what we want in a partner or in a date. What kind of qualities and things we want in the people we want to go out with. Those things, I think, are unavoidable. We all kind of have those things, and I do personally think that there's a degree of space and respect that we do have to have with people's dating preferences, regardless of any problems that they might have, because it is individual. It is a very sensitive thing. It is your choice. It is a door slamming. It is a lot, and it is something that everybody has to sort of decide for themselves, and nobody should have to be forced to do certain things when it comes to dating that they don't want to do. But my 3 main points in this video are, for one, dating preferences can be invalid. They can be valid and they can be invalid, and that is something that everybody should consider, I think. The second thing is that dating preferences should not be extremely inflexible. The third thing that I want to say, which is going to be kind of my conclusion, is that we put way too much emphasis on the dating preference and not on all the other things that are way more important, I think, when it comes to romance and dating and love and stuff like that. Okay, so my first point is that dating preferences can be valid or invalid. I feel like some people will think this is obvious and some people won't. Some people think that all dating preferences are valid, which goes into what we'll talk about later. What I'm here to say is that no, not all dating preferences are valid, even though nobody should be forced to change their dating preferences, sometimes your dating preferences suck. Sometimes your dating preferences don't make any sense. Now, again, I'm coming at this from a point of view of advice. So if you're watching this video, even if you agree with me, you might be a person who has sucky dating preferences. Hopefully you're not, but everybody has flaws. And sometimes your flaws are that you have bad dating preferences. And so I'm going to try to help you figure out what a bad or good dating preference is in terms of basically the rationale behind it. And again, this is my point of view, and if you don't like it, that's fine, and nobody's forcing you to do anything, okay? Okay, so a preference is something that you prefer to do over another thing, right? Well, we're gonna have to restate that a few times, believe it or not. Our preferences are based on a set of ideas, a set of information or thought processes or philosophies we have. That's basically it, right? So a dating preference might be, I want to date tall girls. And then there's rationale behind it, right? So the thing about it that makes a dating preference invalid to me is when the rationale behind the dating preference doesn't make sense. When the rationale behind the dating preference doesn't hold up to close inspection or to logic and reason. And I think that that is important, even though love is not in the same realm as logic and reason, it's about attraction, because oftentimes we make dating preferences specifically out of the idea that we should have a reason, a logic behind who we select as our mate. And if you're gonna do that, then that logic should be good. A lot of times though, the logic is not good. So let me use an example of a different type of preference that I think we can all agree is an invalid preference, and then scoop back over to dating so you could see what I'm trying to say. Let's talk about food preferences, right? Let's say I were to tell you that I don't like Chinese food, and you're like, that's an interesting food preference, right? You prefer not to eat Chinese food is what you're saying. And you ask me why. And I were to tell you, well, it's because Chinese food is unsanitary. It's not prepared well. It's prepared in a very unsanitary way. There's a lot of bad stuff that goes into it, and you could get sick. Even before we get into any deeper observation about that idea I have, the first thing that should be obvious is that a type of food does not require a level of sanitation. Types of food are types of food, and so they can be made sanitarily and unsanitarily. So right off the bat, there's not a logic there, because I am saying that there is a shared quality of Chinese food, which, by the way, let's say I'm saying American Chinese food, because if I were to mean Chinese food as a whole, then that would be entirely illogical simply because there's so many different types of Chinese food. But let's say we both understand that I'm talking about American Chinese food. Well, American Chinese food doesn't have to be prepared unsanitarily. There's nothing about it's a specific type of food, right? So that automatically makes it illogical in that sense. But additionally, now I have to think about also like what I am doing that is making me associate unsanitary food with Chinese food. For a lot of people, they get taught early on in life that MSG is this very horrible chemical that Chinese people put in their food, and that Chinese food and Chinese restaurants are dirty and not well kept, and that the meat is suspect because Chinese people eat dogs. And there's all these very racist stereotypes that get into people's heads to the point where they very seriously think that Chinese food in general as a whole is unsanitary. And even if they were to eat Chinese food, they feel like they have to go out of their way to make sure that it's a sanitary Chinese place that meets their aesthetic and informational desires in ways that other types of food don't, which is unfortunately also like a bad bias, because there's plenty of Chinese restaurants, of course, that are perfectly sanitary. And even if you've had an experience here or there with an unsanitary meal from a Chinese restaurant, that does not allow you to dictate that this overall is a problem with Chinese food. So these are different things that make me say, hey, that's stupid. That's an invalid food preference because the logic behind it doesn't follow. And there's a lot of particular biases there that don't make sense. So reevaluate. There can be valid reasons that one might not like American Chinese food. You could say, I don't like the sauces that they use in those. You could say, you know, I don't like the portions. The portions food feels too heavy for me. There's all this type of stuff. There's too much fried food. There's too much oil, whatever. And those can be more so valid reasonings because they have to do particularly with things that are qualitatively part of the cuisine. So let's get back to dating, okay? We've compared people to food. People are food. A dating preference can be valid or invalid depending on the logic behind it. Some of y'all date only tall guys or strong guys, or you date only short, skinny girls. And you do so because of logic that you probably haven't even parsed out that much. You just think, well, I just like it. Right? Which is altogether just something that I don't feel like we should accept. I feel like we have this whole thing where we want to get as far away as possible from thinking deeply about our feelings and preferences. We want to make it as abstract and as unlogical as possible. Even though, truthfully, there's always a logic behind these things. There's always something informationally that causes us to do these things. And so if you were to evaluate, for instance, why let's say you're a heterosexual woman and you want to date only men that are 5 inches taller than you, right? That's a preference. And that can be a valid preference. Maybe it's just something uncomfortable for you about the way that you feel with a person who's shorter than you that, I don't know. I'm going somewhere here. Maybe you feel like you are a type of person that does not like to use a lot of physical force. And so you really want to be with a partner who has a lot of strength. And so maybe that's why you might want to date a guy who's strong, because you're not the type of person that likes to be physical. And so it would be really helpful for you and very attractive for you to have a partner that can handle those physical tasks, like lifting heavy objects and stuff. That seems very valid to me, right? But if the reason is like, well, I just think it's hot, right? So then you have to think about it deeper. And then if the deeper reason is like, well, I just think that it's manly to be extra strong and buff, that's an invalid dating preference to me, because there's nothing to do with strength and masculinity. That's a traditional masculinity idea that not every dude needs to meet. And that is essentially saying that men who don't meet that criteria are, in a sense, inferior to you. You find them inferior. So you're saying that you date a certain type of person because you find them superior, or you find them to be acceptable based on how they are as a man because they are a certain level of strength. So that's invalid to me. Or if the girl had said like, I prefer dating Asian guys. If somebody says they prefer dating Asian guys, like East Asian guys, and you're like, why? There could be a valid reasoning behind that. Maybe this person grew up with East Asian people and is very familiar with East Asian cultures, is more comfortable around East Asian cultures and East Asian families. And that's a cultural reason that is valid to feel like maybe I would prefer to date folks from that background. But a invalid reason for that would be because I really love K-pop and I really love K-dramas. Because listen, man, like, not all Asian guys are Park Seo-joon. Not all Asian guys are very hot K-drama dudes, okay? There's a lot of dudes who are Asian who have all types of beauty standards associated with them. So this is where I'm just kind of like, it's a struggle, right? Because nobody wants to be forced, again, out of their dating preference. And I understand for a lot of y'all, at the end of the day, you might come away with it like, you know what, screw it. Like, this is what I want to do. And that's fine. But I really ask you to think about the logic, the reasoning behind it. And it's going to take time, and it's going to take sometimes research and studying and conversations with different people. But you will come out of that a better person with better understanding of yourself. And as I'll get into in the conclusion, it will be ultimately very beneficial for you to think through your dating preferences, despite how awkward that might make you feel, and to think about sometimes whether or not the reasons you have behind those dating preferences are invalid. So that's my first point. My second point is dating preferences are too inflexible. And this is where I have to get back to the definition of the word preference. What's Oxford? How Oxford call it preference? A greater liking for one alternative over another or others. A greater liking. Not even an absence of liking for the other option, but a greater liking for one option over the other. Some of you guys think a dating preference is the same as a dating necessity. If you say, I prefer to date Asian guys, and let's say you have a valid reasoning for it, or even an invalid reasoning for it, that's one thing. But if you're saying, I refuse to date anybody other than Asian guys, then that's just kind of bad. I don't know. Like that's just kind of bad. I understand that there's certain cultural norms that dictate that you shouldn't date outside of your race, which I think are problematic, but everybody has their own thing, right? And I understand that there's a lot of socio-political forces that make people want to prefer dating within certain cultures rather than dating within other cultures. But attraction is not something that you can merely standardize, and it's not something that you can attach a pure cultural desire to. I mean, we've watched enough cheesy movies about interracial relationships to know like that's the case. Like sometimes you're going to be attracted to people of different races. And also if you're white and you refuse to date anybody other than Asian guys and you don't Like, there's no valid reasoning for that. That's just weird. Like, that's just weird to me. I'm sorry. And so this is one of the big things that I really took issue with how people were responding to the guy. The charge was not that the guy in the clips was like favoring women of a certain weight over women of another weight. The charge was that the guy was literally like, without even seeing these women and without like even having any issue with these women, and he was very respectful, by the way, very nice. But as soon as he hugged them, which he was doing kind of deceptively, this is the charge, by the way. Again, I don't know what this actual situation was. I don't know these people personally, but the charge was that he was deceiving these women into being like, I'm gonna give you a hug, like as a friendly gesture, and then using that to figure out if the woman was big, like if the woman was fat, and then if the woman was fat, then that was it. That was over. Which, that's just like double layers of fucked up, if that's the case. Which I don't know if that's the case. If that's the case, then you have to say that that's not a dating preference. That's just like a fucked up thing to do, because for one, you're basically lying to people, right? Like you're out here deceiving people into thinking that you're this friendly guy giving hugs, and meanwhile, you're literally just trying to figure out a person's weight. But second of all, that's not a dating preference. That is a dating requirement. You are requiring that a woman be of a certain weight before you even give her a chance, which is just like, look, again, I feel like I need to clarify this too. It's not like fat girls are out here like desperate, okay? Like nobody's saying that you need to be forced to date fat women. Nobody's saying you need to be forced to date fat men or fat non-binary people. They get enough on their own. Like there are plenty of people who will date fat people if you want. I promise you. Like there are many people who are specifically attracted to people who are fatter. Like that's their preference, is people who are of a larger weight. There are also a lot of people who don't care. And there's also a lot of people who are way more flexible about that kind of thing. But like, consider that you didn't even take the time to like look at the person, to see how the person looked, right? Which I get, this is blindfold dating, but whatever. A person might have all these great qualities. A person might be very pretty. You might experience attraction to a person, but you are so rigid to say like, this person has to be of a certain weight. And because of that, you're cutting that completely off, and then you're justifying it to other people by making jokes and stuff like that. But that's not right. Like that's not good. That's not good to you. You don't know if you might actually have a good thing going on. And again, you may never date a person of a certain weight. You might never date a fatter person in your life. But for you to at least like, not even like, for you to see a person as fat to a certain degree and be like, nope, like that's just weird to me. I don't know. Like, isn't that weird? Like, isn't that weird to be like, nope, like you are that weight, so no. That just feels like you're robbing yourself, right? Like, just feels like you're just being uncool about your future prospects, because there might be great partners for you out there that don't meet that criteria, and you care more about this rigid criteria, and I guess what it measures up to with other people's criteria, more than you do like your own like love and your own relationships with people. But with that aside, I think that's the big thing too, is that we really think a dating preference is the same thing as a complete standard, a complete necessity. Like it has to be this. A dating preference is you prefer this. You prefer a person be of a certain background. You prefer a person be of a certain weight. It's not the same thing as being like, no, like only this. And so for that, I feel like the entire idea of dating preferences are completely backwards now too, because we are looking past people as humans in order to see if they meet certain categories. And we do so in part because, again, we have these horrible ideas about love and romance and relationships and intimacy in America, probably throughout the world. These ideas that love is about adhering to a certain amount of characteristics. That if you just find a partner who is XYZ, who meets these categories, or at least a good percentage of them, who passes your test, then that is the person that you should go with. Whereas a lot of people, first of all, will meet somebody who fits all their categories, and then they spend all this time working on a relationship with them, and it doesn't work out. Because for one, you don't know what you want until you have it. For two, you don't know if those categories are at all going to fit overall with that person's humanity, with how that person is compatible with you as a partner. And then people get into these really toxic situations where they just won't leave somebody, or they just get super mad at themselves, or they feel like they're forever alone. And it's like, no, like you're forcing things to be a certain way that's not healthy for you. You should have preferences, but like at least have those preferences as something that you can work with. And if you don't do that, then I'm sorry. Like, one of the best things in the world is being open-minded. Choosing to not be open-minded when it comes to your relationships is a recipe for disaster. And I feel like nothing that I'm saying in this video is particularly incendiary or like insulting or offensive, but I keep catching myself and I keep feeling awkward about certain things because I know that a lot of people might get really bothered, might feel very sensitive about some of the things that I'm saying. And I guess that's where my third point comes in that I'll close with, which is I think we put way too much importance on dating preferences. And that is part of this whole thing where we put way too much importance on like our individual internal stuff rather than on our betterment or our happiness or our, progress or whatever. As people, we are super protective of these ideas that we have. For somebody to even say like, hey, like that's wrong that you prefer this, we get like super offended. And I don't think that that's healthy at all. I feel like you should be able to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with you about your dating preferences and try to figure out what it is that maybe you're overlooking or what they're overlooking. That is supposed to be a part of growth, is being open-minded, having conversations with people, learning and growing and figuring out things as you go. And you never know, somebody might have a valid point that changes the way you see relationships. But we are stuck at base one where people are just screaming at each other and calling each other the worst things about dating preferences and like using the shield of dating preferences to cover up all these different other conversations that obviously aren't really dating preferences in the first place. We do this because we're encouraged to emphasize our freedom over our happiness and our health. We think of ourselves as these free human beings who make decisions based off of nascent qualities that we have when we're born. So you're born and maybe you get socialized a little bit, but generally if you like something, it's because you like it. We love to say that. If you like it, you like it. Like, you might not like something that you liked a month ago right now. You might not like it 2 months from now. Then you might like it again 3 months from now. Obviously, if you like it is a lie. Like, you could like something and then not like something at the same time. But the key is that because people are so sacred about their nascent self, we have this idea of a self, and that self has certain qualities, almost basically like how we evaluate other people. We see a person as a set of qualities. If you're fat, you're that. Like, that's your quality. If you're tall, you're that. And if you are Asian, you're that, right? And maybe we list a bunch of those qualities, and that's why we think it's so valid. Like, that's why we think it's such a great way to evaluate who we date, because we still think that people are a set of qualities. And that's not accurate at all. People are not a set of qualities, because aside from the fact that they change constantly, these qualities are only inventions that society comes up with to label certain things that they do, which has a function. Okay, it has a function to be able to describe people looking differently from one another, but it in no way is something that is scientific or is proven in nature. It is in no way something that like we can definitively prove is like the thing. Ideas of body weight, right? There are people that we see in our society here that we see as skinny that people in other parts of the world will see as fat. And yet we are still like so like, oh yeah, but that's the thing. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is acting like the subject of dating and the subject of love and romance is something so precious that it simply cannot be enumerated, discussed, or thought over. That it is something magical that you come across and that you have to hold on to because it's like a spell that has so many important things next to it. And that like if it's so precious that nobody can intervene with it, nobody can have a conversation with you about it, nobody can alter it, nobody can talk to you. Like, it has to be precious. Dating is not precious. Love is not precious. Attraction is not precious. It is a very complicated thing. It just happens. And like, first of all, you're not going to be only attracted to one person. You can choose to be with one person. Monogamy is perfectly fine, but like, it's not like you're only going to be attracted to one person. But second of all, attraction is not sacred. It's not precious. Love is not sacred. It's not precious. Acts of love, acts of kindness, acts of compassion, I think those things maybe have a preciousness to them, but it's all completely subjective and it's all messy and it's all something that requires deep thought. It requires thought. It requires conversation. It requires confrontation. It requires being uncomfortable. I say all of this not only because I'm like, you know, some social justice warrior who's like mad at people for whatever. Like people, like, you know how the fucking fat phobic people are, where they pretend like they're doctors and shit like that. All this kind of stuff. Like, it's not about even a social commentary, like political view. It's like a general, like genuine person to person human thing that I feel really damages us. Because when we think things are precious, we value them over our own life and well-being. And when we make things so precious, we shield ourselves off from improvement because we are so focused on preserving it. It's kind of like religion, right? Like some people are extremely attached to their religion and their exact set of religious principles. And it's one thing if you just throughout your life decide like, no, these are the good principles. Like, I've thought about it a lot and I keep coming back to these. It's another thing to hold on to a set of religious principles and never question them, never think about them. And when people tell you to question them, tell you that they're wrong, instead of engaging with them in a genuine conversation, you just attack them and you get into wars with them, right? This is the kind of thing that humans do. We are told, we are socialized to hold certain things as precious so that we are willing to compromise ourselves when those precious things feel threatened. And that is how we end up attacking each other. That is how we end up in all of these issues a lot of the times. Not all the time. Everything's complicated, but like a lot of the time it really comes down to other people manipulating the fact that you hold certain things precious, so you'll be able to do all types of things in order to maintain it. Love is not precious. Love is something that is weird and it's ever changing, and it is about constant growth and interrogation. And so when it comes to your dating preferences, you should have no qualms about questioning who you are as a person. You should have no qualms about questioning what you believe in. And when other people are having a conversation with you saying like, hey, you know, you're an Asian fetishizer or you're a fat phobe, you should be able to at least give a good conversation and a good argument about why you're not, or at least be able to hear them out and hear that there may be something that you're missing. But for a lot of people, you see these instant angry responses because even that idea is too threatening to them. Even that idea is too difficult to them, because if I don't have this, then who am I? And I'm here to tell you, like, you're fine. You're fine. If you have a shitty idea or a shitty preference or a shitty belief, it's okay. Like, work on it, okay? It's not okay to just hold on to it. You should work on it, but like, nothing's gonna happen if you suddenly become somebody else. Like, it's part of life. This was a video that I really was debating doing because it's not really my usual thing, and I might take a break next week too. I'm doing good, but like I might not come up with anything cool. It's just that sometimes I really feel like you need to have a heart-to-heart human conversation about things. Like, as much as I would have loved to have been able to come up with some great theory for this video, I hope that at least like giving you my feelings about it and genuinely trying to talk it out with you might be of more value in some respects. I think that sometimes it's easy to forget that the people behind these avatars and these tweets are human. And I don't think any of us, or at least most of us, don't have like bad intentions. Even if we do have bad intentions, we don't realize it because we do think we're doing the right thing. And so I hope that for all of you, you can allow yourself to start questioning what romance is and what attraction is, and start asking questions towards yourself and towards other people about like why certain things are attractive and why certain things aren't, and why romance needs to be a certain way. Because it's only through that constant questioning that we get down to a deeper truth. And maybe we never get to the exact truth, and we're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be pure, but we could at least do a little better. Because I think we all know that things are not good. Things are a little messed up. And so we gotta start somewhere. Weird video. Yeah. If you liked it, hit the like button, comment, send a Ko-Fi if you feel like doing that. Again, subscribe, hit the notification button for notifications about when I post for the community or when I live stream. I do live stream sometimes. Let me know your thoughts about dating preferences. I know these are very sensitive issues for a lot of folks, especially the topic of fat phobia and racism. You know, it's never a big joy for me to talk about Asian fetishization. But to be fair, I did make a big video about it a few months ago. It was called Asian Fetishization and You can check it out on this channel. It's in the ending card now, so now you have to go click on it. But thanks for watching, and I don't know, do better than like looking at the cut videos for your opinions on romance, you know? I don't know, that's pretentious to say. I'm sorry, I did my best. What can I do? No!